Hello and welcome to Python Fundamentals. In this course, we learn the underpinning Python programming skills, preparing for our journey towards mastering the Django Framework and the Python programming language. This tutorial is part of a series of tutorials. You can find the link to the whole playlist in the video description. This tutorial is from our Python Programming Fundamentals for Django Developers course, which you can find and purchase on Udemy. You will find all the latest and updated tutorials, as well as resources and assessments to help accelerate your learning of the subject. The link to the course, which will always provide the best price, can be found in the video description. In the previous tutorial, we introduced the concept of field types for Django models. So let's now go ahead and apply that knowledge and create a new Django model. Let's just first understand some of the different terminology here in Django and what it is we're trying to achieve. So our Django project is typically connected to a database. The reason for that is because we store our data or we collect data from the database. Inside of our database, there are tables, individual tables. These tables allow us to logically separate data within our database. So if we wanted to store data about people or our customers, we would have a customer table. If we wanted to store data about products, we would have a table dedicated to the product data, and so on. A Django model is essentially the way that we build a new table inside of our database that our Django project is connected to. Let's think of our Django model as a blueprint. We're going to define our table name, and in addition to that, we're going to define the fields that are required in our table. And this is the table that we're going to build, a simple table with 3 fields. Now you notice that there are 4 fields, but we'll see why that is shortly. Let's get back to our Django project. So if you are following along step by step, we would have built our project to this point. You can download this code in each section. There should be a resource area where you can download the code, and you can then use one of the tutorials in the first section, building our Django project. At the end, I'll show you how to install the Django application from a requirements file so you can get the code started. So now let's move over to our new app. So we first specify where we want to build or what we want to associate our table with. In this regards, which app. So this is our app here called New App. Now, that's not a very good name. Let's imagine that this app was called Customer, for example. That would make a little bit more sense here. So Django provides us a file here called models.py, and that's where we can build our table. So Django will look for this models.py file and then look for any new changes that we've made and then make those changes to our database. Now, we haven't covered the concepts of building classes yet, but a model in Django is a class. That's all we need to know, just that fact. So we need to build a class. Now, a class has a slightly different format. Now, you can go ahead and check PEP 8 if you would like to learn a little bit how to style a class according to their PEP 8 specification, but typically a class name has a capital letter. So I'm going to call this class customer. And then what I need to do here is I need to bring in the tools that I need to use to define my fields and any other aspects inside of my class here. So I'm going to bring in models. So I'm going to grab the tools that I need, models.model. I need a colon at the end here. And now I can go ahead and start to define my fields. So these are the 3 fields that I want to create: name, age, and mobile. Using the language and what we've learned so far, essentially I'm just going to build some variables here. So, or in that format, so name equals, and then I need to define what field and other properties of that field. So we have name, we have age equals, and then we also are going to create a mobile field. So essentially I'm just building, again, just using the terminology that we've learned so far, just some variables. So now I need to define the field type. So from models, I bring in the tools that I need. So remember that the name here is going to be characters, a string, type of data. So this is going to be a character field. So again, if you're not too sure, just check out the Django field types. So this is definitely going to be a character field. Once you've selected which field you want to use, just double check, because some of them do have requirements. So for example, here you can see we have different options that we can add. So max length equals none. So we can specify the maximum length. And that is just creating another way for us to limit and specify and validate the data that's going to be inserted into this particular field. So for example, a telephone number generally is a standard length. So we can define that length, ensuring or helping to ensure that the data that is inserted is correct. So we can see here in actual fact that the max length is required. So we do need to specify potentially a max length here. So the default is max length equals none. So we can override that. So let's do that in the parentheses here. Just zoom out a bit so we can see max length equals, and let's just go for, well, let's just consider a name is typically no more than maybe 25 characters, right? So let's specify that. So next up is age. So that is going to be probably a small integer. So looking at the options we have here, so I'm just looking for the integer field. So we're going to use the integer field here for that. So we're just looking for any specifications in terms of any parameters that we need to define. It doesn't look like it. So we go back this way to here, and then let's define this. So this is going to be an integer field. Okay, and then the mobile phone can also then be an integer field too. So there we go. So we've now built our table. Now you might be wondering why I'm not building this table here. Now, without going into too much detail, like I said previously, each table or each data, or each row here represents data that we've inserted. So each row here represents one entry into the database. Now each entry, each row, there needs to be a unique value. Now that unique value is important because if I want to retrieve this data from my database, there needs to be a unique identifier so I can retrieve that specific piece of data. Imagine if I had, for example, two pieces of data that were nearly exactly the same. How would I retrieve that one piece of data, that one row of data? Well, I kind of couldn't unless there was a unique identifier. So this primary key, as we can describe it, is a unique identifier which uniquely identifies this row of data. So if I want to gather this data, I would then call that piece of data via the ID, in this case, the primary key. So in this column here, these numbers will always be unique. There won't be a case where a number is exactly the same because this field here is the primary key. To finish this off, when we view the data in our database, we want to be able to represent that data in a certain way. We want to display something. So imagine we return some data from the database and we want to view it without viewing maybe all the data. How can we represent that data? So let's imagine we gathered, for example, this data. We extracted, returned this row here, this data. How can we represent that data? So we could give it, for example, a name, and that will allow us then to identify what data we've returned. So what we can do here, and we'll see this in action if that doesn't quite make sense, maybe I've not explained that very well. We can use the understring method here. This will return, whenever we return maybe a row of data, we can refer to that row of data with a particular name. So what would be really useful is if we add a unique maybe, or just an identification for that piece of data, and that will give us a general idea of what that data is referring to. So here I can say self dot, and then I can use, for example, the name or the age. So name seems like a good idea. Or I could use the ID, the primary key, which doesn't exist yet, but let's put in the name here. Okay, so you'll see that later on when we have a look at the data in the Django admin site, but just keep that in mind for now.